The Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leagues Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast, the Parramatta Times.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here, and it is the Game Day preview podcast of round 13. The Eels take on the Sharks in a shortened round of the NRL due to the State of Origin being played next Wednesday night, June the 5th at Commbank Stadium between New South Wales and Queensland. And so there will be a couple of players missing. One player missing from the Eels, and that is Jermaine Hopgood, and two players missing from the Sharks. Jermaine Hopgood obviously playing for Queensland, representing from Hervey Bay. So, and the Sharks having Cameron McInnes and Nico Hines out of this game representing New South Wales. So congratulations to all those lads, especially Jermaine Hopgood, who will make his debut for Queensland. Even though I am a New South Wales supporter, it's always good to see Parramatta Eels players represent their states. And there hasn't been too many, I don't think, Queensland Parramatta Eels players from over the years. Look, just off the top of my head, without doing any research on this, I can think of Bob Lindner. I think maybe in 1987, I think played for Parramatta and also represented Queensland. Stuart Kelly, he played for Parramatta and represented Queensland. Daniel Wagon, of course, he represented Queensland in that famous 2001 series. Just trying to think of some other ones. Jason Smith as well for Queensland. He played for them as well as played for Parramatta, I think at the same time. Off the top of my head, that's all I can think of at the moment. Look, some others may come into my memory at this time. But look, there's been Clint Shavovsky. Obviously, he was down in Canberra when he played for Queensland. Adam Mogg, there you go. He played for Canberra as well, but he did play for Parramatta, but he was at Canberra when he represented Queensland. So there's been a few players that have come from the Eels that have played for Queensland, and Jermaine Hopgood joins that list of players, so from Hervey Bay, making his debut next Wednesday night. But anyway, I will do a preview on the Origin game next week. This is the Eels vs Sharks game day preview. And look, as I always do at the start of each and every of these podcasts, I do a bit of a stats thing and some interesting facts and figures, I guess you could say. Look, the Eels, they joined the competition in 1947. The Sharks joined the competition in 1967. The Eels have won 4 premierships, 81, 82, 83, 86. And the Sharks have won their sole competition. That was in 2016 against the Melbourne Storm. They beat them. It was a great game, that one too, and I was going for the Sharks in that one. Obviously, Parramatta were in the finals, and I was going for the Sharks in that one. Great to see them win that maiden premiership. They had been in a Super League grand final, they were in a grand final against Manly, which ended up a drawn grand final as well, back in the 70s, but that was before my time. The Eels and Sharks have played 91 games against each other. The Sharks hold a slight lead, 49 wins to the Eels 42. play at Parramatta home games. There has been 50 of them, and Parramatta holds a slight lead over the Sharks in that one. 27 wins to the Sharks 23. The biggest winning margin, and who could forget this game, was in 2003 at Parramatta Stadium. The Eels won 74 points to 4. Now, that is a massive result there for the Parramatta Eels, and that was the night that Jamie Lyon scored a club record 5 tries in that game. And maybe not many people know this, as they may think that his one and only goal kick was in his last ever game of NRL against St George, and I'm talking about Nathan Hindmarsh, but he was 0 from 1 with the boot on that night in 2003. I actually did ask him during my podcast chat with him about that game and how he didn't get on the try scoring list, and he basically just said, oh, well, Jamie Lyon took them all, which is fair enough. Most points in a game is Brett Hodgson, 24. 2002, the Eels won 36 points to 6. Now, these are all Parramatta-based stats, I guess. Most tries in the game, as I just mentioned, 5 to Jamie Lyon. And look, interestingly enough, before my time, Dennis Fitzgerald, 3 tries against the Sharks in a game in 1974, and Ray Price, Mr. Perpetual Motion, 3 tries in 1976 as well. Look, the last 10 games, which goes back to 2016, sees Cronulla hold the edge, 6 wins to Parramatta's 4. So they have a little bit of an advantage, including last year's game in round 2. And look, some famous games between these two clubs that I can think of anyway. 1986 Parramatta Stadium. The Sharks won on that occasion, 28 points to 14. It was the 9th game played at Parramatta Stadium, and it was the 3rd loss that the Eels suffered at their own home ground, the new Parramatta Stadium as it was in 1986. 1991, they played at the Wacker, so the Western Australian cricket ground over there in Perth, and it was one of the first sort of times that rugby league had gone over there. Parramatta, they sort of made a little bit of a name for themselves actually playing over there. I think they played Balmain over there, and this game against the Sharks as well. Parramatta won that game 22 points to 12. There was 18,860 in the crowd. Jason Bell, playing halfback, got a double that day. Brett Kenny was playing in the position of lock, and he was obviously the captain then, and Mick Cronin was the coach in that year. And surprisingly, these two teams have only played one finals game, and that was in 1979. That was won by Parramatta, 24 points to 4 at the SCG, 28,335 there that day. And currently, Parramatta were finished second on the ladder in 1979 and Cronulla third. So there's a few little stats there. I hope you like those little stats of each game day preview. Now, I did try to get a celebrity Shark supporter onto the podcast for this. Unfortunately, I reached out to one massive Sharks fan, and that was Brendan Cow, but I unfortunately didn't get in touch with him. Sent him a message on Instagram. So Brendan, if you are listening to the podcast, which I hope you are, please reach out and let's do a podcast chat, because I know you love your Sharkies and rugby league, and I love talking to rugby league fans. Now, let's get to the game, which is going to be played at Commbank Stadium, 7:50 p.m. on Thursday, the 30th of May, round 13, and it sees the 15th placed Eels take on the first placed Sharks. So they certainly are leading the way in this competition at the moment. The Eels have gone into this game as favourites, according to the bookies. And I could only assume that would be the reason I can only assume the reason would be the fact that they have two massive ins in their side. Clint Gutherson is back after a few weeks off with a knee injury, and Mitchell Moses is back in that number 7 jersey, having not played for 10 weeks with a fractured foot that he suffered against Manly at Commbank Stadium in round 3. And so it is great to see these two back. Absolutely, Parramatta have been struggling without these two players in their side, so hopefully it will give this team a lot of confidence having these two players back. Dylan Brown, he shifts back to 5'8", his natural position, instead of halfback, and not having to lead this team around, so he will be happy about that. Will Panasini comes back into the side in that centre position as well after missing last week's game against South Sydney in round 12. And Brendan Hands has got the hooking spot back off Joey Lussick as well, who is down on the extended reserves bench. So that is really good to see. I thought personally, and a few other Para fans as well, thought that Brendan Hands sparked a little bit of energy, I guess you could say, into that Parramatta side against South Sydney. A few little runs from dummy half, and it just looked like a different dummy half. So Brendan is a bit more of a runner from dummy half if he spots an opportunity, which he did a few times against South Sydney last week. And Joey, he doesn't really run the ball that much. He only has ever 1 or 2 runs a game. So that is great to see Brendan Hands get that hooking spot. Jermaine Hopgood, as I said, is representing Queensland in the Origins, so Joe Ofahengawi gets that lock spot. We have seen Joe start games in previously and Junior Paulo come off the bench, but with Jermaine off on Origin duty, Joe has got that lock position. Bryce Cartwright's in the second row. Kelma Tuolagi is in that second row position. No Ryan Madison, he is on the extended bench as well. And Blaze Talangi, who has been in that Gutherson's fullback position for the last few weeks and doing a fantastic job, I thought. Look, a few mistakes here and there, but he is inexperienced and he is learning his craft. And look, in my personal opinion, and you can agree with me if you want to or not, but I think in the Melbourne game and the game against South Sydney, he was probably Parramatta's best on those two occasions. Our most inexperienced player was probably our best player. So it is good to see Blaze still in this team, albeit on the interchange bench. Look, it may be interesting. He may be there to cover Clint Gutherson. Maybe he may replace Clint at some stage, maybe just before half-time or not. It'd just be interesting to see how Blaze will get used, but I dare say that he will get used at some stage in either at fullback, centre. Look, it'll just be interesting to see how he will get used with interim coach Trent Barrett picking him there, but he will be a bit of an X factor, I think, coming off the bench. Sean Lane has been demoted to the interchange bench from his usual starting second row position, which a lot of Parramatta fans have said that is a small step to potentially being left out of this team for poor performances. So we saw Coach Trent Barrett hook Sean off the ground last week against the Rabbitohs, which has been unusual, as under Coach Brad Arthur he was playing 80 minutes a game, and last week against the Rabbitohs, he did get interchanged quite early on. Rumu Greg, he gets on to the interchange bench, number 17, which is great to see. big Wiremu back in first grade, and hopefully he will add some spark off the bench as well for replacing either RCG or Junior at some stage. So, look, this is probably I guess you could say, probably the most strengthened Parramatta side that Parramatta could put out. I think Luca Moretti has been hard done by. I thought he may have got a bench spot instead of Makatoa, who has played the last couple of games. I like Luca Moretti. Again, can make a few mistakes, but that's football. And I thought he may have got another start in first grade, potentially on the interchange bench. But this side here is probably with the exception of Jermaine Hopgood, who is missing, I think this is probably the strongest team that Parramatta could field. And they do need to do that because they are struggling. They've only won 3 games this season and sit in 15th spot. Turning over to the Sharks, and as I said, Cameron McInnes and Nico Hines are out. Braden Trindle comes into that halfback spot now. Braden, this will be his first game in a few weeks after some off-field issues, and so he will be at halfback. Daniel Atkinson, who has been taking Braden's spot over the last few weeks, he has been playing some really good footy in his 3 or 4 games I think he may have played now, especially the game against the Melbourne Storm where he kicked the field goal and probably sort of secured that win against the Storm. But in that game particularly, he played really well. So Jack Williams takes Cameron McInnes' spot at lock there. And look, it's still a very strong side that the Cronulla Sharks are fielding without those 2 players, to be honest. And one, try-scoring sensation and crowd favourite, Tom Hazelton. Will he get another try on the weekend? Who knows? Oregon Kaufusi comes back to Commbank Stadium, the former Parramatta Eels player, now Cronulla Sharks player. So he comes back to play against his old club, and we all know how players who leave a club, they love coming up against their old club, their old mates, and see how they can go. Teague Wilton has been named as captain, so a pretty good honour there for Teague in that second row position. And to be captaining an NRL side is pretty important and a pretty special honour, so congratulations to him as well. Look, I think this is going to be an interesting game. I think Mulatalo and Katoa on the wings for Cronulla. They know how to score tries. They can get themselves into some ridiculous positions in that corner and score tries, that is for sure. Will Kennedy at the back there at fullback, he has that little bit of speed as well. He can be dangerous. I think he scored a couple of tries against the Parramatta Eels last season. Let's have a look. Yes, he did. He actually got a triple last year against Parramatta. This was round 2 of 2023. The Sharks got the win there, 30 points to 26. So Will Kennedy, he got a triple on that day. So Parramatta will have to watch out for him. Michael Sevo, he got a double for Parramatta on that day as well. So look, as I said, he is one player to watch that the Parramatta Eels will have to watch. But I think, again, this is going to be a battle of the forwards as well between the Parramatta Eels and the Sharks. Whoever can win that forward battle, and it's probably common knowledge through the NRL, whoever can win that forward battle, that gives the backs the room, and hopefully that converts into points. Last time they played was that game at 30 points to 26 at at Parramatta. The previous time they played before that was 2022, and that was the Nico Hines conversion right on full time, the 80th minute, to get the win, 18 points to 16. I always remember that kick every time it comes up. Every time he kicks from a similar position at Shark Park, I always remember back to that kick. But it only shows you that they only play usually once a year, which is a little bit strange. I guess maybe 2 games, yeah, probably not when there's other rivalries to go. But I don't consider this to be a rivalry. Look, a lot of people have a little bit of a soft spot for the Sharks, I guess. I know a few Shark supporters out there, so hello to all of you who are listening. So, look, as I said, this will be a forwards game. Look, I'm going to tip about a 36-20 win to the Parramatta Eels, and I'm going to say, look, I'm going to go a little bit weird here. I'm going to say Oregon Kaufusi as the first try scorer. I think Parramatta are known for their slow starts in games. Last week against South Sydney, it was 22-0 before they even started playing football and got on the scoreboard. So I think Cronulla will lead the game, and I think Oregon will get the first try. How good would that be against his old club at his old home ground? But I do think Parramatta will win the game as well. So I'm expecting a big game from Mitchell Moses. He hasn't played for a long time, as I said, 10 weeks. I'm expecting a big game from him. Dylan Brown back into his natural position. I'm expecting a big game from him as well. Clint Gutherson, well, we know what we get from him each and every week when he's out in that field, but he'll be itching to get back out there. Look, the one thing I will say about this Parramatta side is I have heard through media reports that players are disappointed for the sacking of Brad Arthur, and the players have felt like it has been their fault of his sacking. Well, this is the time, this is the opportunity to prove to the fans, the members, the rugby league community that you guys can put it together, I guess. And if that's the way that you feel, it's time to show it on the football field. And look, if 15th can beat first place on the ladder, we've all heard about the Sharks and their supposed soft draw. Look, at the start of the year, you probably thought this game would be a tough game, considering you would think that the Parramatta Eels would have been a bit higher on the ladder than what they were. But the Sharks, they have played some top teams. They got thrashed last week against the Panthers, so they've had a tough 3 weeks. They beat the Storm down in Melbourne, so that was a big win for them, as they hadn't done that in a while. They beat the Roosters 38 points to 30 at Magic Round. Came up short, very short, last week against the Panthers, 42-0. So they will be hungry for victory in this one, as they will want to get back on track. And that embarrassment against the Panthers, who are now coming second in this competition, they will not want to have another result like that. As I said, Storm, Roosters, Panthers, now Eels. If you at the start of the year, you would have thought that would be a really tough month of football for the Sharks, after having what a lot of people would have said a reasonable sort of draw at the start. But in my opinion, when people say that, I say to them, you still have to win. You still have to beat who is in front of you, no matter who it is. And the Sharks have done that, and they sit in first spot. The Eels, on the other hand, they've lost the last 5, so they are really, really struggling. They need a win just to stay in contention with this top 8, if there's any chance for them to make it. they need to stay in contention, and hopefully they can get on a run. Look, if they lose this game, they could go down the 16th spot on the ladder with the Tigers having the bye. The Rabbitohs too have the bye as well, but their for and against is a little bit worse than the Eels. The Rabbitohs are on 170 minus. The Eels are minus 119. So, look, stranger things have happened. If the Sharks put 50 on Parramatta, then by the end of this round, Parramatta may be last on the ladder, and that will be really embarrassing. Let's hope that does not happen. So, teams above Parramatta as well, the Titans and the Warriors have the bye as well this week. So, it's a really crucial game for Parramatta this week. They need the win, and they need the win to get there, not only to hopefully get on a little bit of a run and get some wins together and just slowly crawl up that ladder, but just to give themselves confidence. And look, confidence can be a massive thing for rugby league players. And look, if you get one win, you never know how that could turn into 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins. You just don't know what can happen. We saw what the Warriors did. They got the win against the Panthers at Magic Round, and they backed that up again against the Dolphins last week over there in New Zealand. So a couple of wins for them on the trot, and it just gives them confidence. And now they have a bye as well, so a good little period for the Warriors there. So hopefully the same thing can happen for Parramatta. But that's about it for this Game Day preview. The next Game Day preview will be against the Bulldogs on the King's birthday weekend, which is June 10th, I think it is, Monday, June 10th. So if you can think of a big Bulldogs fan that you would think I would like to get onto the podcast for a Game Day preview, please message the podcast, let me know, see if I can get in touch with them, let them know that I'm after a celebrity Bulldogs supporter, and we can do a Game Day preview of the Eels and Bulldogs. But this is the Eels and Sharks. I'm tipping the Eels to win. Who are you tipping? And look, at the end of the day, go Para.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. See you next time.